quote, "It is certain that from the creation of the world to the flood, which happened according to chronologists about the year of the world, 1656, being 2307 years before Jesus Christ, and in the 600th year of Noah's age. Men lived a long time in comparison to what they've lived since," unquote. The belief that Noah was 600 years old at the flood is actually a reference to the Anuna calendar of great years, the Ner period of 600-year epochs. So chapter 3 begins, and I quote, "The waters of the flood which purified the earth in the year of the world, 1656, fell 40 days and 40 nights upon the earth, on which they continued 150 more, when they began to diminish, and the earth afterwards began to grow dry." This 150 days of destruction in Genesis, it mirrors the 150 days the locust demons, remember, they are destroyers of the harvest, when they are unleashed on rebellious mankind in the tribulation judgment, in the book of Revelation. I have also showed that I'm not the first one to have conceived this. But those who came before me were disproven because they used corrupt calendars. The difference that I bring to the table is that my 510-page thesis, Chronicon, puts all the calendars of the ancient world together in a synthetic timeline based on the Annus Mundi reckoning, which is used by the Masons today, or at least in Mason literature. Annus Mundi reckoning is absolutely unbroken. It's a single linear timeline. I believe that we are now living in the year 5915 Annus Mundi. And our calendar, Anno Domini, translates to the year 2021. The Fortune 500 companies of today are ancient. They are basically, they've been around since 1902, since they all came out together. It's basically like I said in those videos, all the evidence points to underground. They were waiting for the Phoenix phenomenon in 1902, and all they got was red rain, red mud, and red dust from sky, and a few volcanoes here and there. You know, Mount Pelée on Martinique incinerated 30 to 40,000 people, but they didn't get a whole lot but fallout from the sky. So, yeah, they unleashed all their companies, all their wealth, took back over real quick. It's all the same. They're all the same. They've been doing this for a while. The elite families have been playing this game for a while. That's why the 33rd degree is only a picture of a phoenix, but there's nothing in the degrees that tell you anything about what the 33rd degree is about. The threefold division of reality concerned the heavens, the realm of the gods, the Anuna, what we call space, and earth, where men lived with the gods, and the underworld, or the deep, the Abzu, ruled by the serpent, who was Enki, father of the Caucasian race. Earth was Midgard, and the underworld was Nephilim, the land of the elves, the alien greys, the Semitic Nephilim, being the fallen ones who fathered the Caucasian offspring of the sons of gods, Anunnaki. Long after the departure of the Anuna in 2647 BC, this threefold division took on the religious concepts of a heaven independent of interplanetary space, an earth where gods did not physically exist, and a hell instead of a network of deep earth biospheres, the underground habitats occupied not by colonies of Anunnaki, greys, and humans, but by demons, elves, and dwarves. However, now that it has been invented, and it had been implemented, yes, 1849 is 1,849 years to a year zero, which was created, but that's 1849 years after 1849 BC where the similar events occurred. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's really interesting.
So while trying to cover up a reset and rewrite history of the Justinian plagues and hide the fact that Phoenix changed so many things in 522, they invented a calendar. But in inventing that calendar, they turned around and provided us a template by which we can measure events forward and backward in time. Now, you have to understand, I have problems with thinking that some of these things are man-made. Remember, Phoenix was created to keep the Archons in check, and the Archons are what? All through history, they are the lords of time. They implement and they execute timekeeping systems, and they change human perception of timekeeping systems. But Anyway, that's the ACBC. That's the ACBC cross-calendrical parallels. Cross-calendrical parallels don't just involve AD and BC. They also involve other calendars, such as, I'll give you an example. 1229 BC is the fall of Rome after 10 years of Mycenaean invasions on the coastal hinterrealm of Ilium. Troy falls in the 10th year of battle, 1229 BC. But the descendants of the Trojans, the Romans, who started their calendar in 753 BC, 1,229 years after that, Rome falls, the same 1229 years. And we find this over and over and over throughout. There's this template all throughout history. These cross-calendrical parallels can be applied to all civilizations that were related, such as the Hittite Empire. Variable stars are called variable stars because they change their magnitudes, which is very unusual. Meaning sometimes they're very, very dim and sometimes they're very, very bright. In my Dark Realities video, I explained that these luminaries aren't true stars. These are local objects that are very close to our atmosphere. The Phoenix phenomenon is created by a holographic projector system. What I am describing is something that is technologically advanced. It's inside the simulacrum. Or it's outside the simulacrum, but it creates phenomena optically and physically that's inside the simulacrum. The vapor canopy that I have shown in prior videos and in a lot of posts in Facebook Archaix group could never exist on a world that was, if this was the true paradigm, if this was the real world, the vapor canopy wouldn't work on this model. And yet, in the historical record, we do have the presence of the vapor canopy. For those of you who don't know, in ancient times there are descriptions of a watery atmosphere, a mesosphere that magnified the heavens at night to where stars that cannot be seen with the naked eye right now were seen then. And they are attached to zodiacal traditions and different matriarchal, basically it was the matriarchal societies back then. It was stellar worship, lunar worship. The moon was seen brilliantly in the sky. But the daytime was like a dark purple light, a sky. The sun was unknown, absolutely unknown. The war between the states was from 1860 to 1865, and World War II began in 1939 with Germany annexing Poland. But the actual World War did not begin until 1940 and ended in 1945. Look at this perfect sequencing backward and forward in time from 1902 between the years of the war between the states and the years of World War II. Thus Manetho reckons the reign of Vulcan, the oldest Egyptian god, to be 9,000 years, which Africanus observes were basically resolved by historians into months, and they were undoubtedly to be understood. Here is a major data point that identifies Vulcan as Enoch and Enki. In Genesis 5:22, we find that Enoch walked with God for 300 years. And here we find that Vulcan lived before the flood for 9,000 years. But that these years were merely 30 days each in Egyptian reckoning changes everything. 9,000 divided by 30 is 300 years. Vulcan was a ruler, and according to the book of Jasher, Enoch ruled over 130 kings and princes, just as the Egyptian Coptic ruler named Surid ruled 130 nomes of Egypt and was the founder and builder of Giza and the Great Pyramid. It's all memories of the same personality in the same time period, but from different cultures. Isn't that weird? So, Velikovsky's Worlds in Collision is a masterpiece of archaeological and historical and chronological material. Unfortunately, he makes the mistake of attributing these cataclysms in world history not to the Phoenix, but to Venus. Emanuel Velikovsky, his research is genius, but he did us a disservice by not paying attention to the ancient chronographers who also told us that many people make a mistake between Phoenix
and Venus. And Venus, because Venus is in the sky all the time, and Phoenix only appears every 8 years and sometimes 276 years, it was really easy to forget one and then basically uphold the other. But it's interesting because Phoenix is the bringer of darkness. Venus is the light bringer. Isn't that weird? I don't know how they made it. I don't know how they made that mistake unless it was intentional.
But there's a change in the position of land masses and the oceans, and it's always 30 degrees. Well, the next one is going to shove the United States even further south. The Gulf of Mexico is literally going to flood the interior of the United States. Houston's going to be the first thing wiped out. Galveston will be a memory. The water will go all the way up into Canada. It's going to split the United States in half. The East Coast, east of the Appalachians, millions and millions of American homes, cities, people, they're going to be gone. The Appalachians will become a chain of islands. The Rocky Mountains will become a chain of islands. Everything on the West Coast will disappear into the Pacific. The Pacific will be very different. The new North America will be whatever is presently under the ice right now at the North Pole. There will be a 30-degree shift.
Listen, you guys have common sense. If our science is so sophisticated that we've been to the moon and we've sent probes outside the solar system, if our science is so sophisticated that we have performed splitting atoms and the discovery of positrons and neutrinos and all this BS that we're told, if our science is so sophisticated that we have done all this exploration on our world, how is it that weathermen can't 100% accurately predict the weather? If you have weather stations set up every 5 miles, then you already know what the weather is in real time. Follow me? Weathermen aren't predicting anything. They know what the weather is in real time everywhere. And if the winds are headed, 15 mile an hour winds with 20 mile an hour gusts at south by southeast, then they automatically know the path of a storm, so their prediction is merely a trajectory inferred by geometry. This ain't actual predictions. All you're doing is giving us projections based off past telemetry. Very easy to do. That's what weathermen do. But every time they're wrong, what do weathermen tell you? Oh, it ended up being a beautiful day today. We're so proud. We're so glad to live right here in Corpus Christi, Texas. Beautiful weather and all that. We had a high pressure system coming. Yeah, I'm tired of hearing about your low pressure systems and your high pressure systems that they're completely used as explanations as to why the weather didn't go the way the weathermen said it was going to go. My point in telling you all this is about the weather. The weather isn't caused by a ball spinning around on an axis. Weather isn't caused by that at all. Alright, so weathermen, the weather isn't caused by the Newtonian physics that we're led to believe. It's caused by something else. The simulacrum has its own protocols. It's the circumpolar sky. It's the circumpolar constellation in the north. The dragon is close to the pole star, so close that his eye was Alpha Draconis. It's the only star in the ancient vapor canopy world that did not move, because the other constellations moved around it. And every day, they counted the rotations of the tail of the dragon, and the tail of the dragon would tell them when a new day had started. And they counted those because the years were unknown. In all ancient manuscripts across the board, I have shown you in the Archaix presentations that the years were unknown to ancient cultures. They didn't factor them, didn't care.
This length of time is the common denominator linking the Hindu yugas to the Sumerian traditions, Chaldean histories, the Mayan and Olmec calendars. I have repeatedly asserted and shown many charts on how these 432,000 shars of the Sumerian history are not 432,000 years, as Zechariah Sitchin and all his followers on Anunnaki studies have published. But admittedly, Also right here, also, it's really, I was so shocked to find that this author also associates this timing of 432,000 units to 1,200 years. For 360 multiplied by 1,200 is exactly 432,000. This length of time is the common denominator linking the Hindu yugas to the Sumerian traditions, Chaldean histories, the Mayan and Olmec calendars. The beginning of this 1,200-year period, as I have shown many times, is 3439 BC. 1,200 years before the Great Flood. 3439 BC was the appearance of Enki. 1,200 years, or 2 Anunnaki-Nur periods of 600 years each, to the year 2239 BC, the Great Flood. There are many chronologists throughout history who have dated the pre-flood world as being 1656 years, copying the biblical record, but they don't actually produce the dates when that happened. There are some who have, and they got it wrong because they tried to copy early Jewish history before there were, after the rabbinical corruptions were introduced. One of those chronologists is Archbishop James Ussher. But in modern times, using the chronological statements in the Book of Jasher and in the Genesis text and the Assyrian eponyms, the modern author Stephen Jones wrote a book called Secrets of Time, and in his index in the chronology in the back, he dates the flood at exactly 2239 BC, and he dates the beginning of the modern world's calendar, the Annus Mundi calendar, at 3895 BC. This is totally independent of the Phoenix research. In fact, I had not even developed my Phoenix chronology, which also says the exact same thing, until years after Secrets of Time was published. Remember, we don't live in an actual reality. We live in a perceived reality. Yeah, man, it's so easy to deceive. When you put filters over the central nerve, when you're jacked into the central nervous system, which is nothing but a series of filters that keeps you from seeing everything that's there, keeps you from hearing everything in the audible range. It limits your olfactory senses. Listen, guys, it's a series of filters that's necessary to create the world we're in. But it's not a real world. I tell you all, guys, all the time, this is 100% perceived, not actual. You must understand the implications of what I'm saying here. Charles Fort in 1919 said it best: we cannot isolate particulars and then pretend that we have discovered anything at all. Who would not be a prize marksman if only his hits were recorded? The Archaix data does not cherry pick information for the public. We publish it all, even if we disagree with it. And we've done that over and over. All of this is going to return after 2040. The vapor canopy is coming back in 19 years. In 19 years, we will be able to use the Great Pyramid for whatever it's used for. Whatever the Great Pyramid does, it will be fully functioning in 19 more years. Because that world, the vapor canopy, as I have showed in my other videos, will return. We can't stop the vapor canopy world from coming back. And when it does, we're gonna have all kinds of latent genes and gene sequences that we have right now that they call junk DNA reactivating. Because we have all kinds of awesome abilities that will change us during the vapor canopy. We live longer. We age very, very slow. We're immune to poisons. In that poem, he wrote a most incredible statement that some unknown body, not the moon, passes over the surface of the sun and darkens the earth at a fixed time. And Lucretius associated this to repetitive earthquakes that destroy civilizations. Pliny, in Natural History, wrote that the span of human history there transpires ominous and long drawn-out eclipses of the sun, and that their cause was hidden by the rarity of their occurrence, and for this reason they are not known. Pliny added that these strange darkenings of the sun were quite natural, and that they transpired at very fixed times. In 1919, Charles Fort, in the Book of the Damned, wrote, "So it is not only that many eclipses unrecognized by astronomers as eclipses have occurred, but there are several allusions to intense darknesses that have occurred upon this earth, quite as eclipses occur, but they are not referable to any known eclipsing body." Although it's not the subject matter of this video, the Great Pyramid's internal dimensions is a template of our holosphere. Now, in my Chronicon, and a few videos, I explore ancient testimony of the Great Pyramid Complex and Sphinx, and that it remained underwater after the Great Flood in 2239 BC. It's because half of it was underwater while the other half was built. But it took a long time for the water to disappear where the Great Pyramid was. And this is why there are so few traditions at that time of the existence of the Great Pyramid. This is the origin of our traditions on Mount Shasta. This is the origin of the traditions of all these Shambhala, these underground beautiful civilizations that have everything. It's because it's not mythological, it's true. These civilizations have always blossomed underground. There's more real estate in the underworld than there is on the surface world. Because on the surface world, we can only spread out in 2 dimensions. In the underground, we can go in 3 dimensions. In simple arithmetic, guys, there's way more space in the underworld than there is on the surface. We are discussing topics and require a maturity from you, not to get angry about what you hear, but to help us investigate it. Let's get to the bottom of what happened in the ancient world. This video is disturbing, but these videos are going to get more and more disturbing until we start seeing with clarity that we have all been manipulated. The importance of the 1561 Great Black Spear event over Nuremberg is connected in the holography in a very intriguing way. The hidden reset of 1902 that I have covered a lot on is exactly 341 years after the sky anomalies of 1561. In the holo field, we have what are known as holoflective projections. These are found everywhere in history. In this case, in the space-time structuring of unfolding events, the 341 years to 1902 is reversed to the holoflective sum of 143, the reverse of 341 years. I know a lot of you don't want to go through my Chronicon. It's huge. That's why I provide this. It's only about this big, but it gives one-liners for every little thing that happened year by year during those 5,000 years of history. So, and it gives you the exact date. Listen, this thumb drive, it is filled with way more than was in the Phoenix drive, because I just have that much more data on the Anuna and Anunnaki, Nemesis X object. Even in the old Sumerian text, it says Enki came from the deep. He was Lord of the deep. The deep was underground. This was the ancient Greek Tartaros. Somewhere in the far west, but deep underground, was the origin of the Anuna. By the time the Babylonian Edamu cult priests were telling the story, centuries after the Cataclysm, now all of a sudden the Anuna were Anunnaki, and they were gods that descended to the earth. After the return of the Sky Dragon, people will come up out of a mountain from underground to re-educate the surface world. This is Mother Shipton's prophecy from over 500 years ago. After the Phoenix phenomenon and the return of the Nemesis X object, separated by 6.5 years in 2040 to 2046, we have the elite, their industrial military complex, their scientists, those who were preserved in cities underground, who survived, they'll be coming back up. When they come back up, they'll be coming up from Colorado Mountains, Cheyenne Mountains. They'll be coming out of the Appalachians. They'll be coming out of different mountain ranges in Australia, in Europe, Switzerland. They're not even a secret. You can easily find all kinds of official government documents on the funding and the building and the contracts to build these subterranean cities. People considered to be of direct descent from the Anuna became the ruling elite. Shimsu Hor, or the Shining Ones, were a white-skinned, fair-featured race closest in descent from the Anuna, and they resided in the regions of Egypt and forged a mighty empire. Out of those composed 5 days, and added them to the 360 days of the year, which days the Egyptians called intercalary, and on them celebrate the nativities of 5 of their deities. On the first, Osiris; on the second, Apollo; on the third, Horus; Typhon on the fourth; Isis on the fifth; Nephthys or Venus on the last. Oh, well, that would be the fifth. From this old fable, we learn that the original Egyptian year consisted of 360 days before the 5 intercalary days were discovered. Now we're getting somewhere. Jackson, in this huge book, never mentions cataclysms and natural disasters, except a few references to the Great Flood as a chrono marker. But here, we get to the meat and potatoes of the origin of these mysterious new 5.25 days added to the 360-day calendar. The very names attributed to the mystery days signifies their origin. Osiris and Apollo are the sun, and Apollo is also the destroyer. Horus is the son of the sun, and Typhon is the slayer of Osiris, the sun. An ancient name I have shown from many ancient sources was another title for the phoenix. Isis was consort of Osiris, and Nephthys was the goddess of ancient Egypt of the air, who was worshipped in Lower Egypt, the region of the Great Pyramid.
So, one thing that I address in my dark realities video that I don't really talk about in other videos is the fact that I have a personal belief that inside the simulacrum is another species trapped in here with us. They're not aliens and extraterrestrials from outer space, because in the context of a simulated environment, we're in a Dyson shell. And inside this Dyson shell, there is no access to space. You're not going out there. We're not going up there. Only in a simulation could that story be true. I wouldn't contend that, Sylvia, because the division in this paradigm seems to come from an incident that we can't prove actually happened, but it's very well encoded in the traditions of the Middle East. And that's the Tower of Babel story, when 70 different languages and cultures were begun at the same time. Do I believe that actually happened? No. Could it actually happen? Only in a simulation could that story be true. To me, it's a veiled threat from the overseers that if you build another structure to do what the last structure did, we're going to handle your ass. That's basically what the Tower of Babel story is. So evidently, there is an escape, or there is something that humans can build and activate that would significantly weaken the holography.
Just like somebody wanted us to know the Sibylline oracles, though they masked it in Christian iconography. It's very interesting how all this works. We don't know if this is of human design, or if something greater is preserving elements of ancient truths and making sure that we receive them in the garb that we will accept them. Thor Heyerdahl in the 1930s and 40s published the truth, and at that time it was not amazing to Thor Heyerdahl that when he went to Micronesian islands in the middle of nowhere, thousands of miles from Easter Island, he found the same stories of white-skinned, blue-eyed Caucasian mariners who visited the islands and gave them infrastructure, and gave them technology, and gave them religion, and gave them hope, showed them, delivered domesticated animals that they had never seen before. Thor Heyerdahl left Micronesia, went into Melanesia, and found the same thing. So he went into Polynesia, and thousands of islands in Polynesia, he visited those and found the exact same thing. So he went north to Hawaii, and to his astonishment, the same traditions were found. And all these YouTubers are putting out videos demonstrating that these mega detonations that are occurring underground are all happening at exactly the 10-kilometer level, and that therefore they're not earthquakes or seismic activity. These are detonations. I agree with you. You have no argument from me on that.
Act as if you are, and you will be. Man, when we act and assert ourselves upon reality with absolute confidence, reality around us reciprocates, and the conditions of our lives suddenly shift
to comport with this way that we see ourselves, or this persona that we emanate and we give off that is accepted by people around us. This fearlessness, it's absorbed into our environment, and our environment responds, and it creates situations by which others see us as fearless and dauntless and even supernatural. I'm telling you guys, in prison there were times when I should have been killed dead. I should have died. Sometimes I wonder even how the hell I survived all that. And then other times I remember my mentality back then. I used to walk through those cell blocks like I was absolutely untouchable. I had this fire in my soul. I was reading, I was researching. I knew I was heading toward some type of great paradigm shifting information. And year after year after year, I'd learn more and research, and I would write all these things down. And in prison, I just knew that these guys were lost, and there is no one among the living dead that can affect me. They cannot touch me. I remember adopting this attitude, and I remember every once in a while getting into fights, and I just entered into them effortlessly, and I knew where to hit somebody to take them down, and I knew when not to punch and when to block, and I knew, and I would end the fight, and I wasn't even breathing heavy. And I remember the looks on people's faces in day rooms and on rec yards when they saw how effortlessly I took other men down, and I just went and played the game, so continued playing basketball like nothing happened. And I never really held grudges against these guys because in my mind, I was alienated from the tribe of humanity. There was something different in me that forged me ahead no matter my environment or my circumstances. And I have adopted this personality out here in the free world now. Although it's not so necessary because I'm not surrounded by all these dangers. I'm not surrounded by these people that misunderstand me so they want to hurt me. It's a different reality out here now that I am free. But the fundamentals haven't changed. People are always people, no matter if you can find them or not. Look, over and over, Typhon is the sun slayer all throughout ancient history. Matter of fact, there's an Egyptian text that reads, "In the Typhon time, the sun is veiled." So we have this power, unseen, that all suddenly appears and darkens the sun. You guys that are familiar with my Phoenix research, that's no mystery. So we have these 5 days, and they're added to the 360-day year when Phoenix was blamed for this change of the calendar. Interesting. Fort notes that in 1902 appeared a strange new star, a light-reflecting body. Newtonian astronomy unable to account for what was clearly observed in 1902, this star was quickly forgotten on the principle that what cannot be readily explained need be readily ignored. Unable to assail Fort's sources and unwilling to entertain his conclusions, the academic community bullied him with silence. A pillar to the laity, he was poison to the learned, an oracle of insight ignored into obscurity. The four horsemen of the apocalypse, it is very little known. I have mentioned it in my videos because it's important, it's relative. But in the four horsemen of the apocalypse, we have four horsemen come to usher in a literal reset, a destruction of the world. But the four horsemen are not alone. A careful reading of the passage says when the fourth horseman comes and ushers in what he does, a fifth horseman follows after. It's a very obscure reference in the book of Revelations, but it's there. There's not four horsemen, there's five. Absorbing whole ethnic groups, foreign populations, their languages, creeds, and beliefs, the government of Rome had become too overspread, plagued by civil unrest. Though the political structure faltered and collapsed, Rome religious authorities did not fail to perceive a common thread of belief among all the diverse groups throughout their empire's vast provincial domains. In deepest Africa to the battlefields of the Germans, and from Gaul and the kingdoms of the Celts to the Western Europe to the civilizations of the Near East and abroad, all mankind knew of and feared the Phoenix.
Once you understand that a shar is a day, everything starts making sense. Zechariah Sitchin lied to us about the shar, and it did research. Look what it did. It gave birth to a bunch of Billy Carsons. who are out there putting out a plethora of terrible data, fooling a lot of people. The accurate information makes everything in the ancient world, all the mysteries make sense. Once you understand that a shar is a day, everything starts making sense. It's amazing. This information has been covered up. But Zechariah Sitchin was also on an agenda. Zechariah Sitchin is Jewish. These people have kept this information from the whole world. But the shar is a day, and this data is inescapable. It is inescapable. Now we need to start understanding why this information has been deliberately kept from the majority of the human family. Why has a small minority been allowed to keep this fantastic data, to rewrite all these books, to perpetuate these frauds upon us, and be so well funded like Zechariah Sitchin with his Earth Chronicle?
Manetho had seen the Chaldean history of Berosus, who from the most ancient Babylonian records reckoned in 10 dynasties 120 sari of 10 years each, or 1,200 Chaldean years of 360 days each, from the beginning of the Chaldean kingdom in the antediluvian ages to the universal deluge. This was taken from the annals of the Temple of Belus. But it was improbable for Manetho to find any kings who reigned in Egypt before the flood, and therefore he feigned a catalogue of kings who really lived several centuries after the flood, to be of antediluvian deities, or god kings, and made their times equal to the 10 antediluvian kings of Berosus, and to be just 1,200 old Egyptian years of 360 days, from Vulcan to the flood. So here it is, mentioned in this 270-year-old study, what I have published so widely about the true interpretation of the 432,000 days of the Sumerian traditions about the appearance of the Anuna before the flood. I have repeatedly asserted and shown many charts on how these 432,000 shars of the Sumerian history are not 432,000 years, as Zechariah Sitchin and all his followers on Anunnaki studies have published. But admittedly, also right here, it's really, I was so shocked to find that this author also associates this timing of 432,000 units to 1,200 years. For 360 multiplied by 1,200 is exactly 432,000. So guys, the story of the Sumerians and their beliefs about the Anuna is critical to our understanding of what is unfolding today. When we remove the primitive frames of reference, the childlike descriptions, and we analyze the core common denominators left to us in these astounding ancient cuneiform documents, well, we're left with the description of a vast catastrophe that was predicted, and the vanishing of an advanced population that departed so they could survive it. When you go outside your backyards and you look up at 2 o'clock in the morning at that beautiful array of luminaries in the sky, you are looking into a multi-tiered hologram from the inside of like a toroid shell, a Dyson shell that's in the shape of a toroid. And you can thank Stephen Walsworth for putting me on that one. I have been really looking into the toroid geometry, and it does explain our anomalous situation. But the Phoenix phenomenon is a weapon hidden in the sky. A very damaging forgery of the Book of Jasher was published in the year 1751 in England. It was republished in Bristol in 1829, a poorly written work of 62 pages that makes Jasher to be one of the judges of the Old Testament. It has no connection whatsoever to the actual Book of the Upright that I'm citing here, which is a huge book. Had this plagiarist known that Jasher literally means upright and was a description of the text's historical integrity, he would have not have committed so blatant an error as to claim that Jasher was a pronoun, the name of a hitherto unknown man in biblical history. But the damage was done. To the 19th century critics and scholars, the forgery provided the prejudice that they needed to shun away any further research. Academia now pretty much regarded this as a false text. In the face of higher criticism, the real Book of Jasher was fated to live on in obscurity, suppressed by those who would have greatly benefited the world by studying it. Though the Royal Asiatic Society in England discovered yet another copy of the Book of Jasher far away in Calcutta, this fascinating chronological record of the pre-flood world and ancient history thereafter is only now beginning in the 21st century to gain prominence among serious researchers.
This is a problem for a lot of scholars. It shows that the text of Tacitus, which was in the possession of the church for centuries, and only the church possessed copies, had been tampered with. Because scholars have amassed a huge list of all the naturalists and all the writers who were alive at the time, of the first century AD. And there's no reference to a sun darkening. There's no reference to an eclipse, no reference to an earthquake. And for that matter, there's no reference to any miracle worker or any type of controversy going on anywhere in Jerusalem or the surrounding environment.
Now, the whole world does not change their timekeeping systems in the same time unless something very significant occurred that was universally experienced. And something, in fact, did happen. A major event not taught in schools, university, or our history books. It is a very centered event. In the year 713 BC, the son of Sargon II, King Sennacherib of Assyria, came against Jerusalem. King Hezekiah was afraid and consulted the prophet Isaiah, this being his 14th year of reign. In the temple, the prophet told the king not to worry, for God would send a blast upon the Assyrians, and Jerusalem would be saved. Though Sennacherib would escape, he would be killed in his own land. As the Assyrian army approached, something in the sky changed. The sun stopped. And then the sun moved backwards, a whole 10 degrees arc across the sky. The 713 BC event has 185,000 Assyrian soldiers vaporized, precisely dated by biblical chronologist Stephen Jones in The Secrets of Time. Bible margins in the year 1890 accurately dated the sun retrograding phenomenon in 713 BC. James Ussher's chronology is again precise in his dating of the sun retrograding 10 degrees in the year 713 BC and the 185,000 Assyrians vaporized in 713 BC.
The Sumerian king list is very interesting because it's describing that these cities were dropped from the sky. I drop Eridu. And then it continues on with the king list, and it names the kings and how many shars they ruled and all that. Then I drop Larak. Then it names the kings and the dynasties that ruled Larak and the different situations that happened before the flood. And then I drop Shuruppak. And it goes off and describes what was going on in Sumerian times at that time. The Sumerian king list is very interesting because it's describing that these cities were dropped from the sky. Now remember, in the prophetic, in the eschatology, that's what we have. We have in the book of Revelation the return of a city to the world. It says, and Abraham went to Egypt to look for a city whose builder and maker was God. Here we have a reference to something in Egypt that was dropped from the sky. So this parallels the Sumerian records, which parallels the prophecies about what the apocalypse is about. And then at the end of the apocalypse, we have the descent of the chief cornerstone, which parallels the prophecies of the coming of a city from the sky.
And this is why the Sumerian texts on the Anunnaki are absolutely packed. Whole sagas and epics in the Sumerian and Akkadian cuneiform are all about trips to the underworld. Hundreds of years later, when these stories were redacted and rewritten by the priesthood, they didn't have the frames of reference to understand that originally these were technologically advanced trips into subterranean facilities. Garden realms, Edens, holy mountains underground, full of all the delights and provisions. I don't want to say I don't want to offend people, because as a simulationist, it doesn't matter to me if you buy into the paradigm that we're on some ball going around the sun. That's fine, because the simulation is designed for you to accept that.
It doesn't matter if you believe we live on an absolutely flat plane, because the mathematics is demonstrable, and I can show you that we live on a flat plane. But I can also show you curvature equations all throughout the sky that make you believe the optics are that we are going around a ball in a solar system. The problem is that there is a third paradigm that very few people are understanding, and that is that if we are completely immersed within a simulation, a copy of a real universe, then there has to be real reasons, there has to be predicates as to why we're here, why a copy was necessary, what is being studied as we're living out these lifetimes, why this copy is only focused on catastrophism, actual cycles, because every ancient calendar, the only common denominator we find in ancient calendars is they all began when something very disastrous occurred. And for that to be the idea behind the study of antiquities and ancient history, then that means that's what the simulation is about.
You and I are in a simulation right now. This simulation began not too long ago. We as the human species are trying to figure something out. We have a problem. The entire history that we perceive right now about the Anunnaki, about who Caucasians ruling different civilizations, infrastructures, all this stuff, all the Anunnaki histories, man, all of this is entirely a part of a series of simulations that are being conducted right now because we're in trouble and we're trying to figure out how we can survive. We are sentient, immortal beings trying to figure out what we're going to do when the Nemesis star explodes. None of the stuff in my Anunophiles videos has happened yet. It's all simulated. But it could happen. This is what I'm trying to convey to people in my new Archaix 2.0. We are programming living within bodies that we perceive as bodies by this external stimuli. We are connected through our central nervous system. But it's all phantom. He was right. This is the subject of over 30 of my videos, that we are living in a simulation. And now we will continue, and we will go deeper into the year 1902, and we will show that it wasn't just catastrophic on many levels. It was a true reset in all the senses of the word.
Was 450,000 shars before the flood. There it is. I've already showed you guys the 432,000 years of the Sumerian texts. From the appearance of the gods to the great flood is only 12 centuries. It's the lunar-solar calendar. It's the days, turnings of the stars.
The leaders of the scientific world for the past few centuries have been in Europe, Russia, the United States, Canada, China, and Japan, and none of these regions can view the southern heavens. In classical and more ancient times, astronomers viewed the depths of space from the Mediterranean, North Africa, the Near East, India, and China, and still the southern circumpolar stars cannot be seen. In the year 1879, Major John Wesley became the director of the Smithsonian Institute and the U.S. Bureau of Ethnology, its very first director. During his 27 years at the Smithsonian, he oversaw the systematic destruction of anomalous artifacts and archaeological reports concerning gigantic human skeletons, technological relics excavated, and discoveries of old world visitations found throughout North America. Old ships were purchased by Wesley's office and packed with artifacts and burned in the Atlantic.
The SS Bano Burn vanished in November 1902 on Lake Superior after departing Port Arthur, Ontario, with a cargo of 85,000 bushels of wheat. Now, the steamer Algonquin spotted her, and the captain noted it, telling his mates to have a look at the majestic cargo ship. But a moment later, it was reported to the captain that the Bano Burn was not there. And the captain realized it had vanished. The men of the Algonquin, they had noted that the Bano Burn didn't have time to sail away. No ship can move that fast. It should have been there. It didn't even have time to sink in the time that the men had looked away and looked back. Also, there was an unusual storm that night that rolled over Lake Superior, and the SS Horonica had reported strange lights appearing over the lake. These lights were also seen and reported on the beaches of Rossport and Scribner. So we have three different testimonies about unusual lights being in the sky over the lake. But this is after the SS Bano Burn that day had vanished.
A massive search was conducted for the Bano Burn, with tugboats combing the lake. Captain George Woods and his 22 men disappeared without a trace. That ship has never been found in Lake Superior. Scientific surveys were conducted in probes of Lake Superior in the year 1976 and again recently in 2002.
So, every 138 years, it can activate. When it activates, somewhere on this world is going to suffer mud floods, volcanic resurfacing. They're going to suffer liquefaction. A horn blast from the sky is so loud and deafening that solid objects liquefy from vibration. People, biology, we're made of biological shells. Well, it's very hard to bring something that is made of almost all liquids to bring it into resonance with a solid. If a horn blast from the sky is deafening and it's hurting and it's hitting a certain decibel level, then glass is the first, crystal and glass is the first, and then all stone and then metal. It will vibrate at the same frequency. It will all be in resonance. When it does, everything loses its physical properties. The vibrations become so intense, the ground, the bedrock, the foundations of buildings, pyramids, pyramidal structures, ancient cities, wagons, wheelbarrows, whatever's on the ground, it just sinks. It just goes straight in the ground. The problem is the humans, it takes a while for them to build up in a resonance. Can vibrate a human completely out of existence. We're made of liquids. Animals and humans, we're made of liquid. This is the reason why humans are able to get away. Humans to cover their ears and run and get out of the region. Or go into a body of water where the resonance won't be applied. It'll actually be dissonance. So while everything is sinking, like Göbekli Tepe, like Mohenjo-Daro, like many ancient Sumerian cities where we found whole libraries buried intact at Nippur and Uruk and Nineveh. This liquefaction sinks the constructions of men, but the people themselves escape, or they just vanish. Simulation theory has been around for a lot, but right now it's exploding across YouTube. Now, my evidence is not like other people's. I don't come to you from the scientific perspective. There's too many people trying to do that already. I come to you from the common sense perspective of mathematical constructs that are too perfect to be history, and yet we can perfectly document them. Therefore, we're in a construct. But here's where we're at with simulation theory. And remember, you guys heard it from me. Remember this. Simulation theory has been around for a lot, but right now it's exploding across YouTube. Even the big wigs, you know who they are. David Icke, you know what I mean? Billy Carson, you know who they are. Greg Braden, all the big ones, all about simulation theory now. All I'm doing, like I said, is bringing a new way of analyzing our reality, and that is through the historical records, mathematical perfection. That's all I'm doing. This video is just showing you that just like in ancient times when the phoenix appeared, the mandate of heaven changed and rulership of the world was given to another people. It was given to a different family of the elite. This is what happened in 1902, and in order for that to have been a smooth transition, they had to get rid of William McKinley, and they did it really dastardly too. 2 gunshots to the stomach and 1 in the groin. They made sure he died. 1962 is the first year of operations for the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base's Foreign Technology Division. If you don't know anything about this, 1947, the alien assist of Roswell, alien technology. The myth has always been that this stuff has been taken to Area 51, Hangar 18, and all that. That was all government misdirection. Those items were actually sent to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and held there in the Foreign Technology Division and studied and retro-engineered to create all kinds of alloys and things that we have in our military today.
The sun is a projection. It's a lens. The moon is a projection. It's a hologram hiding something else. There are weapons in the sky that if you truly saw what was there, it would horrify you. When the power source collapsed in 1566 and 1561 over Basel and Nuremberg, people saw in the sky exactly what was there, and it wasn't. The sky had literally collapsed as a projection. They saw the orbs, they saw things moving around they couldn't understand. Like the word Shem, an old Semitic word that has dual meaning. It means someone's name, and it also means monument. And the reason they are synonymous is because, like in the book of Genesis, when Jacob raised a Shem, it was two things. It was a pillar of stones, and the pillar of stones had his name carved in it. This was a boundary stone, letting all his neighbors know that this right here was the edge of my property.
There's an 11th code system. It's not Moses. It was God's. And I found it by accident. And it's irrefutable what I found. But like I said, the Torah actually gives an exact drop dead date for this event, October 16th, 2046. And that's dead center of when the next Gleisberg cycle will be, which is between September and December 2046.
Not only is our world not what you think, but the stars lie. What do empires do? They seek to control all of the world they can. So basically, empirism is globalism. Or, if you don't like the globe model, or, I'm not a glober or a flat earther, and I'm not just trying to stay neutral either. I'm a simulationist. And simulation theory encompasses both. All the facts and evidences that are provided in flat earth are answered in simulation theory. All the proofs and evidences that we live on a planet going around the sun are answered and explained in simulation theory. Because we're not. I promise you that. Everything is simulated to make you believe that it is. But it's not. I'm telling you. I tell you guys all the time, not only is our world not what you think, but the stars lie.
But this chronological sync is confirmed further by the fact that Eugenius claims here that Pythagoras lived 534 years before Jesus Christ, which is also perfectly within the 61st Olympiad.
I believe the pyramids were built by machines. I believe that less than 600 men could have easily built those pyramids if they had they have used conveyances and machines. And I believe that the ancient accounts of watching giant blocks float through the air is cargo cult phenomenon. It's not actual levitation. What it is people from a distance who are not a part of the construction crew, who are more primitive, watching from a distance as giant stones on cables are being floated through the air by different tractors and different mechanisms like that. My interpretations on how the pyramid was built is not metaphysical at all. I believe it all can be done through engineering. It just can't be done through the BS that the Egyptologists are putting out today about copper chisels and iron hammers. That's bullshit.
The people of the serpent aren't what you think they are. My own personal theory is that whoever the pure blood Anuna are, they can't live on the surface. This is why we have the elements. The elements are hidden in the Eden story of Adam and Eve, the serpent, and the two trees. Because Eden means walled enclosure. Adam and Eve were subservient to whoever the gods were. Because remember, it's the Judeo-Christian version of the story that gets you to think of gods in the singular. It says the gods made man after their own image. Therefore, humans, all the indigenous humans that were already in the world, were made in the image of their creator. But for some reason, the creator couldn't live on the surface. So they stayed in these Eden. Now, these people, the Adamu, they had freedom to be able to move around and go everywhere, but they were imprisoned in the mind. Meaning, the gods had basically told them they couldn't do this and they couldn't do that or they would die. They found out it wasn't true by a benefactor who had told them a little bit more information, who didn't like the original plan. This benefactor was later demonized into being a serpent. But the benefactor used that serpent as a badge and basically created the serpent people, or the people of the serpent, who go all throughout history. The people of the serpent aren't what you think they are. Every time they show up in history, they're benefactors. They lay out infrastructures. They create all kinds of habitations. They are basically the offshoot race of the trickster. And the trickster is a benefactor who benefited ancient men, because the gods that had created the Adamu were liars. They had told them that they would die to instill fear. But when the truth came out, all they could do was curse.
These seem to be holographic precursors to what will happen in 2040 when Phoenix devastates the East. You guys know I'm always telling you, if something is true, it can be seen from multiple different mathematical vantage points. The Phoenix number is 138 years. 138 divided by phi, or 1.618, is 85 years. And 85 years after the Great Black Spear of 1561 over Nuremberg was the year 1646, when the famous researcher John Graves published on the Great Pyramid, the very first publication of its kind, showing the mysteries of Giza. His work was published in England, and on May 20th in England, strange noises accompanied with rumblings in the sky were heard over England throughout Norfolk, Suffolk, and Cambridgeshire. A pillar of cloud appeared that seemed to ascend out of the ground, that was in the shape of a pyramid, and others at greater distance saw an upside-down spike descend from the sky to connect to it. This event was published in the book The World's Most Mysterious Objects and on page 108. May 20th is very, very close to the Phoenix periodicity, as many of you know. That the Great Black Spear object is a copy of or connected to the Phoenix phenomenon is found in that 138 years after 1561, the Nuremberg incident, was the year 1699, when 400,000 people died in an earthquake in China. Proof this is no coincidence is found in that 138 years before 1561, in the year 1423, we find that the isolationist mandarins in control of China destroyed all the maps, all the books, records, libraries, archives throughout China, dating back thousands of years, completely ending countless centuries of progress and discoveries. These seem to be holographic precursors to what will happen in 2040 when Phoenix devastates the East.
Therefore, I conclude that I am inside a simulation. So I was confronted with a paradox, a very intriguing enigma that ate at my soul for a year or two. Everything I had uncovered and documented was true. Yes, there's a 138-year Phoenix timeline. Yes, it appears in May. Yes, its appearances were documented and dated by other authors, not me. Yes, this 138-year timeline is coded in the measurements of the Great Pyramid. Yes, Phoenix appeared in May of 1764 and was observed by astronomer Hoffman and about 500,000 people in Europe. And yes, Phoenix appeared in the month of May in 1902, and I have 3 videos about it. Yes, the ancient year was 360 days. Yes, the modern year, it has been for over 26 centuries now, 365.25 days. Yes, under the Newtonian order of planetary dynamics, this series of facts that I just itemized for you is absolutely impossible. So, if every conclusion is a result of a long series of facts, and each fact supports all the others, then I was left to reconcile this paradox by the only explanation currently plausible. This is all programming. I have discovered coding protocols. Therefore, I conclude that I am inside a simulation.
But the Roman pontiffs They can't hide the phoenix because of its very special role. No matter how many times the authorities change calendars, no matter how many times they alter the dates, they switch chronologies, they introduce new timekeeping systems, and conduct massive campaigns on book burnings. Doesn't matter how many times they do this, since ancient times, it has always been known that none of this mattered because Phoenix has always been, as I have in my published book, the keeper of the calendar. The reason it's relevant to you and I is because the exact same thing is about to occur. It's going to occur in less than 19 years. The year is 2040 in the month of May. We know the exact date. It's encoded in the holosphere. It's May 15th. You got some time. A lot can happen in 19 years, but in 19 years, a lot will happen. It's called the Phoenix Weapon, and I've got many videos and published books and posts all about it.
When the vapor canopy collapsed, the ancients all recorded that the sun was born. Into them the sun was born. At the same time that Aryan Caucasian type peoples weren't really concentrating on the sun, they were concentrating on a very interesting visual effect of the absence of the vapor canopy, and that was the rainbow. Suddenly rainbows appeared. And the appearance of the rainbow entered into the historical narrative as a promise from the Godhead, the Creator, the Oversoul, that he would never again flood the earth.
Yeah, they say it was touched up by the church. And you guys know that the church is the one that introduced the whole Phoenix phenomenon to the crucifixion story, the story of the Passion, because the earliest depicted story of Jesus was the Gospel of Marcion. No miracles, no virgin birth, no sun darkening, no earthquake, and none of that stuff happened during the crucifixion. All that stuff was added later to give it veracity, to borrow from the antiquity and prestige of a phenomenon that was very well known among cosmopolitan societies. And that was the return of the Phoenix. That was well known. And they tried to tap into that faith by throwing these symbols into the gospel narrative.
The Phoenix phenomenon throughout the historical record is it has the same themes. Phoenix in the ancient mythological traditions was basically interchangeable with Vulcan. And Vulcan is where we get our volcanoes from. This Phoenix and Vulcan make their appearances all throughout. Every time there's a major Phoenix event occurs, it's always with volcanoes, the sun going dark, red dust and red mud, and we have our geologists or the uniformitarians, and we have people who really think that their education gives them the right to impose the belief upon a whole historical series of data sets for which they've had no contact. I get this all the time. I get emails from people all the time that tell me, "Oh man, the sun merely darkens because it was a volcano," or the red dust and red mud and red rains that fall over the world. It's just atmospheric fallout. It's sand from the Sahara Desert. This has been proven all the way since, guess what year they quote me all the time? Oh, ever since 1902, they've been telling us it's Sahara. We knew that back in 1902. Yeah, white sand from the Sahara causes red dust to fall over the world. So we're going to address these in this video.
They discover the return of the vapor canopy, the Phoenix. This induces a deeper study, more think tanks, an assessment of the tens of thousands of archaeological findings that never made it to the public arena. The elite discover that the canopy alters human DNA, allowing for rapid healing, longer lives, holding the breath for long periods of time. The canopy produces a world without rain, but very humid. A mist that will water the surface every evening and morning. The sun will vanish in the dark violet sky by day, but at night the canopy is clear, magnifying both the moon and the stars. Under this thick mesosphere, there is no wind, and oxygen density is more than 60% what it is today.
So we have a problem. We have technology being used against humans. The vibrating is a technological phenomenon. People sink into the ground as structures collapse on top of them, and then the structures sink into the ground. The ground is liquefied into a mud as real mud is falling from the sky. Whole civilizations are buried in minutes. The Phoenix cataclysms have happened like this over and over and over and over. And we don't have more direct evidence because the libraries and the historians that would have recorded these things sank into the ground as well. It's harrowing.
I do not believe the Phoenix phenomenon is going to affect much of the Israelite descended peoples or the civilizations they host. This means that that type of protection, that discriminating power of whatever the Phoenix phenomenon is basically going to preserve the Western world. I know it sounds weird, but I'm also cognizant of very specific prophecies of Nostradamus and where the areas that are affected are going to be. Several large cities of the Western world will sink. They will be destroyed. But I'm not sure about losses of population among Western peoples. I'm just not sure.
The Americans weren't. This is how they did it. But in 1135 BC, Wu lost. Wu left. 250,000 people. And there's many scholars who are of the opinion that those 250,000 people ended up on the far western shores of the Yucatan, Central America. They began building pyramids and cities that were very Asiatic. But they integrated with the locals and began mimicking their architecture, and they moved to the Gulf of Mexico where they built the mighty Olmec Empire, pre-Mayan people. These are the people who were the ancestors of the Maya. This is why the Mayan calendar copies the older Olmec version. The very last year recorded on any Olmec steles or stelae is the year which translates in our own Anno Domini calendar as 31 BC, which was the Phoenix year when Queen Cleopatra died.
At sunrise on April 14th, 1561, the citizens of Nuremberg beheld a very frightful spectacle. In the morning of April 14, 1561, at daybreak between 4 and 5 a.m., a dreadful apparition occurred on the sun and then was seen in Nuremberg, in the city, before the gates and in the country, by many men and women. At first there appeared in the middle of the sun 2 blood-red semicircular arcs, just like the moon in its last quarter. And in the sun, above and below and on both sides, the color was blood. There stood a round ball of partly dull, partly black ferrous color. Likewise, there stood on both sides as a torus about the sun, such blood-red ones and other balls in large number. About 3 in a line and 4 in a square, also some alone. In between these globes there were visible few blood-red crosses, between which there were blood-red strips, becoming thicker in the rear, and in the front malleable, like the rods of reed grass, which were intermingled. Among them 2 big rods, one on the right, one on the left, and within the small and big rods there were also four more globes. These all started to fight amongst themselves, so that the globes which were first in the sun flew out at the ones that were standing on the sides. Therefore, the globes standing outside the sun in the small and large rods flew into the sun. Besides, the globes flew back and forth among themselves and fought vehemently with each other for over an hour. And when the conflict in and again out of the sun was most intense, they became fatigued to such an extent that they all, as said above, fell from the sun down upon the earth as if they all burned. They then wasted away on the earth with immense smoke. After all this, there was something like a black spear, very long and thick. Antonio Henao summed it up best that a mass of unfamiliar and large objects passed over the sun as smaller objects fell from the sky to the ground, while a massive black spear-shaped object moved across the sky.
1561 was an interesting year. These men put forth the theory that the Black Sea flood was that of Noah's flood, but they isolate the Black Sea from the cataclysm that actually produced it. The Mediterranean Sea, the Aegean Sea, and the Black Sea, today all of the same level, were created from the same sudden devastating event and ever remembered as Noah's deluge. So, this the Anuna, the Anuna left, and this answers your question, Jamie. The Nazca lines were all designed by a post-technolithic people, meaning they still had access to some of the technology, but they had inferior knowledge of how to use those technologies. And they use those technologies to create these Nazca lines. And they're amazing, but they're designed to be sky-facing. You can't see the patterns from the ground, but from the air, you can see them all.
And prior to the appearance of the vapor canopy, there was no moon in orbit around the sun, around the Earth. Now, again, I'm not trying to offend you flat earthers, but you know, we live in the simulacrum. We don't live in an actual we don't live on a real planet going around a star. All of that is optics. Every bit of that is designed for you to believe that we are.
Could it be possible that all our souls here on this plane of simulation are being quarantined to be cleaned before the soul could exit the matrix? You, sir, have not been watching all my presentations, but I forgive you, because that is my conclusion. We're living through life sims. We are developing an immortal personality because the final avatar that we're going to get is going to be godlike. And in order to receive such an inheritance, then we must be proven to be worthy of that, trustworthy, because this is just an initiation. This is what the holy mysteries were about in the Orphic faith, in the Delphic faith, in the ancient stage plays. This is the story that was told. This is who we are. This is all a test. Every bit of this isn't even important. None of the historical details are, but it's in analyzing the historical details that we realize we're in a construct. Were we supposed to ever discover we were in a construct? Maybe not, maybe so. But in the end, it never matters, because these life sims are going to unfold with the development of the immortal personality. Then then when this simulacrum collapses, which this is all about, that's when you'll receive your avatar. Your real immortal avatar.
The Mediterranean Sea that you know of today was not there in the 4th millennium and 3rd millennium BC. It did not exist. It was a series of freshwater lakes. One day, the land bridge, the pillars of Hercules that connected Europe to Africa, broke. The Atlantic Ocean burst through the Strait of Gibraltar, filling the tree-filled valleys. The sudden incursion of 100-foot-high walls of foaming seawater drowned over 200 cities and hundreds more communities, and floods like little fingers raced through the lowlands, cutting off the escape of untold myriads of communities. By the time they heard the distant roaring of the raging deluge, as it moved hundreds of miles per hour, it was too late to attempt an escape. The force of the world's entire sea level pushing the Atlantic onward to penetrate the Dardanelles and create the Sea of Marmara, before bursting through the Bosphorus land bridge with violence to fill the freshwater Pontus Lake in the creation of the Black Sea.
As I have shown many times, the architecture of our holography is often patterned in pi and phi structuring. So in order to better understand the connection between 1561 and 1752, we examine the 191-year duration between them. 191 years times phi, 1.618 golden proportion, is exactly 309 years. Adding these 309 years to the year 1561, the great black sphere over the sky of Nuremberg, we arrive at the year 1870.
Life is a circus, and we all take turns being the clown. We all do dumb things from time to time, but it doesn't make us stupid. It doesn't make us dumb. And to educate you new guys, the simulacrum is our present existence.
It is an editable existence. It's edited by us from within it, immersed in this Maya, this world of illusion that we are jacked into through our central nervous system. But it's also controlled, observed, and edited by humans on the outside. When you go outside your backyards and you look up at 2 o'clock in the morning at that beautiful array of luminaries in the sky, you are looking into a multi-tiered hologram. Sounds like children's tales to us today, but the geographical areas that are mentioned in the Jason and the Argonaut's tale have been verified by scholars that this must have been an actual legitimate naval voyage that was just shocking for that time period. So Jason and the Argonauts, right after that, during the Age of Heroes, we have this major conflict. It's called the Seven against Thebes. The Thebes is the Greek city of Thebes. And the reason this conflict was inevitable is because this is the pre-Greek people, but it's the area of Greece today. But we have a major population of Amuru, Westerners. We have a major population that came by way of Egypt. We have a major population of Canaanites, Canaanite Phoenicians, and we have a major population of Danaan. These were Mediterranean, almost international mariners, a mariner race.
But after the collapse, Neanderthal came back and started eating Cro-Magnon. When I say Cro-Magnon, it's I hate saying it because it elicits the vision of something that happened in the extreme ancient past, and it didn't. It happened in the last 5,000 years.
Let me tell you something. The city of Jericho in Israel was rebuilt 17 times. There are 17 layers of occupation in Jericho. There are many other ancient Near Eastern cities that have the same number and even more. It's because they'll live in the city for 213 years and there'll be an earthquake. They got to rebuild. What's the best building material? Well, it's the broken stones and rubble that's all around us. So let's just fill in all the gaps, pour some lime and all that shit, make a foundation and build new houses. And they did it. They did it 17 times. So that is not evidence of your resets and mud floods and all that. The Great Pyramid in the Giza deal was built. It's been radiocarbon dated over 60 times, and every sample was 28th to 29th century BC. The science supports the chronology. The chronology doesn't lie. The Great Pyramid took 90 years to build, which was 1,080 months. It was finished in the 1,080th year. This is the subject matter of coffin text 1080. I said, I don't make all these things up. I just put them together from all the different sources because I do not allow preconditioning and preconceived notions of history and compartmentalization to guide me like these dudes do.
No other building in the world is so precise, a self-referencing holographic model of our space-time coding. The Great Pyramid is enormous, a 41-story high structure. It is 203 levels of blocks, some courses higher than others. The beginning of the 144th level is 4140 inches above the pyramid foundation. 144 is the great number of the golden mean, the Fibonacci series. It is 12 times 12. It is the cycle within a cycle. And that level of blocks marks the 4,140th inch above the pyramid foundation. 4140 is 138 times 30. This exterior height is replicated in the internal descending passage mean length. The east terminus length is 4134 inches. The west terminus is 4146 inches. The central mean distance is 4140 inches of passage length from pyramid entrance to subterranean passage floor joint.
But in 1901, Charles Piazzi Smith, he didn't understand what he was looking at. He could not process hyperbolic curves in solid stone to precision, such high tolerances to 0.025%, which is flatter and smoother than the marble on bank buildings. found at Giza. He could not process how 2.5 million blocks that were all 2.5 to 5 tons apiece. Some of them were 70 tons. But how they could have all been put together in 203 absolutely perfect levels, and yet still there was mortar between the stones, 1/50th of an inch thick, with a chemical composition unknown to us today. We don't know what some of those compounds are in that adhesive that was used at the Great Pyramid. We don't know how that adhesive is actually harder than the limestone blocks itself.
We see the evidence of machine use inside the Great Pyramid in the Grand Gallery that has technolithically precise niches that have no function whatsoever unless a wheeled mechanism went up and down the Grand Gallery, maybe at high velocity, but there's no purpose for those niches. Engineer David Davidson drew on the Grand Gallery and on the technolithic mysteries of the Great Pyramid, showing that only machines could have put all this together. So, the evidence of machining is everywhere. In order to get that perfect 138-year sequencing and all the rectilinear measurements of the Great Pyramid, a machine was required. So, I'm also going to go as far as to say that the type of machine may not be anything that people are ready to accept today. But there's a lot of evidence that some of the architecture and some of the technolithic relics that have been left behind were done by some type of very, very hyper advanced 3D printing with stone. And I'm going to leave it at that, because there's a lot of people not ready to make that cognitive leap yet.
He knew the Phoenix was coming. Same thing Thales of Miletus did in 585 BC when he predicted the sun darkening in 583 BC. It wasn't the moon. It was something else that darkened the sun. Archaix did that, and they awarded him the kingship of Argos. So this was during the Age of Heroes. Now, right after that, I'm talking within a decade after that, we have the famous story of Jason and the Argonauts. This is not mythology, guys. It's been turned into mythology by this real simplified way of conveying information because their infrastructure had collapsed.
Well, listen, we only have the example in real time of the Patagonian giants in South America, but we have the example from 1902 of two scientists growing 2 inches from being exposed to ambient radiation from a volcano. But if a vapor canopy forms in our life, I don't believe we're going to go through many changes. But I believe our children are going to be fundamentally different. They're going to thrive in that environment. But that's because they were conceived in that environment. And most of your genetic coding is set at the moment of conception. And that setting is all determined by a whole bunch of environmental factors. Imagine a major epic systemic cataclysm when everything on the surface is lost. Then the people in the underworld bring it back to the surface. 35th century BC, it answers all the mysteries of anthropology and archaeology. And now all this is going on. Humans are thriving right after a cataclysm. They're thriving in the pre-flood period. This is what's going on.
When we understand that the Anuna were simply just normal humans, everything in the historical record makes sense. We're dealing with cargo cult phenomena. Cargo cult phenomena, for those of you new to my channel, is the introduction of a technologically advanced people among primitive indigenous people who have no frames of reference for the things they're observing. When they see a man with glowing sticks go out onto a long stretch of flat stone on the ground, to them it's a religious ceremony, and a shaman is waving magical staves, and it calls down these metal birds from heaven, and the metal birds open up, and people come out with boxes and cargo, cigarettes and t-shirts and sweets and Twinkies. And when the indigenous natives see what's going on in the South Pacific in World War II, when the GIs were disembarking the cargo freighters and bombers, the indigenous people thought it was magic. So after the war, the indigenous people
the Micronesians, Polynesians, Melanesians, Hawaiians, they try to replicate. They perform these rituals that they saw these white people do that brought down all this good stuff from the sky, from heaven. These big giant metal barking birds. And they try to replicate these in rituals, hoping that it will work for them. This is cargo cult phenomenon. The history of the world, the history of our traditions, the history of the mythological records, our folklore, our fairy tales, everything. They all preserve accurate information. It's the frames of reference that have changed. This is what we're dealing with. But it's never gods we're dealing with. We're dealing with humans. And we're dealing with people who have lost their infrastructure, their frames of reference. A long period of time goes by before a technologically advanced race resurfaces, comes out, and teaches the people on the surface basically everything they need to know again. This has happened multiple times. This is one of the core tenets of my research.
But it was very interesting to me because he's right. There is no evidence of slow transitional development. There is no evidence. This is why the scientific community has had to do these lies like the Piltdown Man. Then you come to find out that it's almost all plaster of Paris, and it was all built and constructed by an artist off of a bone fragment, which was genetically tested recently and found to be a pig bone. That's the scientific establishment. Did the scientific establishment ever go back to the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s in the last 20 years and rewrite any of the history books based off the fact that that DNA is a pig bone? No, they didn't. They're still going with evolution because that was just a fallacy they put out. But they've put out hundreds of fallacies and they've been busted, but it doesn't matter. I just can't. I can't understand. I can't process how anybody could look at themselves and see how dynamic and beautiful constructed the human avatar is, and our cognitive abilities, our ability at intuition, the predecessor of knowledge, at empathy, the ability to feel emotions, although I'm not experiencing the same thing you are. How can you employ these three spiritual faculties and then sit there and look me in the eye and say, you know that you descended from a chimpanzee? That is astonishing. You are a special breed of stupid, and I can't talk to you.
Well, what's your take on the actual location of the pyramids? That's like ground zero, you had said on the last time you were here, right?
Well, okay. When the Great Pyramid was built, indeed, well, I'm on board with it. It used to be the 0 degree longitude, 0 degree latitude. It was the prime meridian. Yeah. It was the dead center. As a matter of fact, the Great Pyramid was built before we had literacy.
But I'm also, guys, I amend my opinion about things as I come into contact with new data because I have to assimilate everything. Everything has to fit. And one thing I'm finding out lately is I just saw some compelling information that just kind of floored me, and it kind of changed my mind about something. Remember, I told you I thought the vapor canopy was the whole 1656 years, but I've seen so much evidence that there was vapor canopy at that period, but there was also it was periodic. Couldn't have been the whole period. I'm finding more and more that giantism has happened without the vapor canopy, only in the proximity of volcanoes. In volcanic rich area, volcanic rich soils, and plants that are growing out of volcanic loam and soil. And let me give you an example. The Spanish explorers 400 and 500 years ago were mystified by the Patagonian giants at the tip of South America. That's pretty compelling. There wasn't a vapor canopy back then. So I don't know how long those giants were, but there are traditions of giants from all around the world, and many of the cultures that preserved these legends of giants and all seem to come from volcano-rich areas. Don't mistake where a race of people or a culture is presently located, because their traditions would have come with them from the places they had formerly occupied. This is something this is something I'm getting into now, guys. So I try not to leave a single stone unturned.
Scholars now know which areas of the books of Josephus and Philo-Judaicus and other ancient texts, Tatian, Tacitus, Julian, where all the forged texts are. We know this now, and it's easy to discern, because what the early Catholics, Roman Church didn't take into consideration was that 1,000 years later, archaeologists would begin opening the tombs and catacombs of many people in Rome and surrounding areas in Italy, Vesuvius and Pompeii and Herculaneum, and we have a bunch of copies of those books. Even new books by Livy, it's all been discovered, and we see what the original copies convey.
And I'm going to show you a series of charts. I'm going to release a series of videos, and I'm going to show you that the history of the world was recorded in the Great Pyramid. I'm probably going to be the very first person on this rock that is able to demonstrate this, because everybody who has tried before failed, and they failed not only because they had inaccurate measurements. Sir Flinders, they all did it before Sir Flinders Petrie, but they failed principally because they had inaccurate chronologies. And I know that the reason that I went to prison at 17 years old was to put together this chronology.
The Great Pyramids are pre-Cataclysm, and this is why there's no historical references to the building of these structures. In the histories, which is huge, it says, "But as to the building of the pyramids, there is no agreement either among the Egyptians or their historians." And that's very true. Even 1,000 years ago, Al-Masaudi, Al-Makrizi, Biruni, the great Arab travelers and scholars, they all wrote about Giza and the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx and its mysteries, and they all were in agreement that had the Great Pyramid complexes been built after the flood, then there would have been a written record as to the builders. There would have been a civilization able to lay claim to their construction. The Arab scholars are not wrong. The Great Pyramids are pre-Cataclysm, and this is why there's no historical references to the building of these structures. In Herodotus, 450 BC, we're talking about almost 25 centuries ago. This great historian, Herodotus, even agrees nothing is known about the Great Pyramid. There's 450 miles between the Great Pyramids and the oldest Egyptian cities. But all of a sudden, Egyptologists want to tell you that the southern Egypt, that called Waset and Kemet, that buried their rulers in the Valley of the Kings, somehow also came all the way north and built all these pyramids to put pharaohs in them, for which not one mummy has ever been found. It's just ridiculous.
If you're going to break free or die trying, that means in all elements. Yeah, you got to make a choice. Are you going to live for you and be you, or are you going to be a part of the collective? Are you going to be a slave, or are you going to be free? It's really that simple. I would rather be an anomaly, an outcast, and an outsider than ever be included with this collection of morons that we know of as the collective. This is cargo cult phenomenon, and it's exactly what we read in the Akkadian and Sumerian texts. So for those of you who don't know, cargo cult phenomenon was coined after World War II, when it was noticed that primitives were mimicking everything that they saw that the U.S. Marines had done when they had taken over different islands in the Pacific, in the war against the Japanese. So because they had seen this so many times, they saw that when a man waved sticks on a long strip like a runway, a metal bird would come from the sky and give them giant boxes, and in those giant boxes were those smoke things and that good jerky and these drinks that were delicious, and these packs that you could add water to. You could boil water, add water to it, mix it up, and it's a meal. And the natives would trade. They would make things out of plants, and they would find beautiful seashells, and they would bring them to the soldiers, and the soldiers would give them cigarettes, and the soldiers would give them t-shirts and give them pocket knives. And to the natives, they saw that certain activities resulted in certain effects. So when the Marine Corps left the islands after World War II was over, the natives built mock runways, mock buildings,
conning tower, control towers. They made sticks. They had shamans go out there and wave, and they would pray for the metal birds to come from the sky. This is cargo cult phenomenon, and it's exactly what we read in the Akkadian and Sumerian texts. It's no different. We are reading from the perspective of more primitive people who are trying to keep pace and describe things that are far more sophisticated than they can really compute. This is why we have had so many problems processing what we're finding in the oldest records in the world.
It changes everything to the point where 9,000 moons is 750 years. This 15,000 years is actually the same as the moons that were told by the Egyptian priests of Sais, who venerated the goddess, who used the lunar reckoning system in northern Egypt when they told Solon that Atlantis was destroyed 9,000 moons ago. He translated as years, and that's what Plato published. But Eudoxus of Cnidos and Diodorus corrected this and said, no, this was 9,000 moons. Changes everything. It changes everything to the point where 9,000 moons is 750 years. It completely takes Atlantis away from the Graham Hancock Fantasy Golden Dawn Society version, Helena Blavatsky Society version of 11,600 BC, and puts it in its historical place where it belongs. When the navies of the Sea Peoples Federations that were coming from the Atlantic coast were attacking the Mediterranean world. It all fits perfectly. It fits so perfectly that all the people that I've called out for debate on this, like Graham Hancock and like Jimmy Corsetti and like Matthew LaCroix and like Billy Carson and a couple others, won't debate the issue because they've looked into it and they know they're wrong. They've doubled down. They have decided to continue with the lies because it makes them money. But it's not the truth. The truth is right here.
He had no idea that what he was documenting was an actual phenomenon that can be dated with predictive value. So he wrote books called Moons, Myths, and Man, the Book of Revelation History, Built Before the Flood. He wrote a book called In the Beginning. He wrote another book called The Atlantis Myth. In the Atlantis myth, he explains the cosmic causes of the Great Flood and even calculates that the Maya were familiar with a 2,760-year cycle. 2,760 years is perfectly divisible by 138. I have put back the history of the world in Chronicon, and someone else has verified it independently named Stephen Jones. He is a biblical chronologist studying the Assyrian eponyms, the Book of Jubilees, the Book of Jasher, and the Old Testament. He put together an Old Testament timeline and dated every single event exactly as I did in Chronicon. Shocked me, blew my mind. But then again, he wasn't using biased materials or corrupted data taken from James Ussher. He was doing original research, which is something that I value. So I'm not really surprised that two independent minds at two different times in history came across the exact same conclusions. So Stephen Jones' chronology is my chronology. It's the exact same one. There is no differences. We don't deviate on a single event in a single year. And that's because once you get the date for the Exodus right and the date for the Great Flood, every other event in biblical history can be dated perfectly. And because you can date perfectly all the biblical historical accounts, you can now compare it to secular history, and you can get the Egyptian king list, you can get the Aramaic text, you can get the Samaritan text. Everything falls into place. So many inventions, innovations, discoveries, founding dates for major companies that exist and thrive today, 120 years later, all suddenly appeared in that tiny fraction of time. Double-bladed disposable safety razors, air conditioning, neon lighting, tungsten light bulb filaments, vacuum cleaners, radio receivers, polygraph, the lie detector tests. Even the teddy bear all made their debut at this time. All things we take for granted in our everyday life in 2022, right now. But they suddenly appeared in 1902, or the end of 1901, beginning of 1903. The traditions were very clear. Suddenly the sun appeared. in the ancient Egyptian pantheon. When the sun appeared, they began to worship it in Egypt. Priorly, the sun had not been known. There were matriarchal cultures that were venerating star systems and had lunar timekeeping systems, but they didn't know anything about a sun. In the ancient Americas, 2239 BC began basically the Heliac calendars. These are the sun calendars. So what happened? And why is it relevant to the Anunophiles and the coming apocalyptic period? The answer to these questions is shocking. Then in the reign of Romulus of Rome, something very unusual happened. The months of the calendar became confused, according to Plutarch, and the people invented monthly systems in an effort to keep to a year of 360 days. This record reveals that the length of the year had changed. Amazing confirmation of this calendrical change comes from the fact that Roman records cite that in the reign of Numa, I believe his name is Numa Pompilius, this being his third year of reign, he changed the calendar in Rome from 360 days to 365.25, beginning the civil year, and he started it January 1st, a total change in the calendar. The space-time connection between 1833 and the Black Spear object of 1561 is that 1833 serves as the perfect epicentral year, measuring both backward and forward in time, connecting 1561 to the year 2106 AD, or the year 6000 Annus Mundi, the return of the chief cornerstone. 1561 is 272.5 years to the year 1833 that we just reviewed, the meteoric fallout, the disappearance of islands in the Pacific. And 1833 is another 272.5 years to 2106 AD, when the real stone will descend from the sky to complete the monument of man at Giza, the stone the builders rejected. Now, Medusa has always been linked to the stars. The eye of Medusa is called Algol, the ghoul, an undead creature, also known as the blinking demon, in the Perseus constellation. It marked a region of the night sky feared by Bronze Age humanity. Algol is a variable star called Beta Persei, the demon star, in many cultures.
From the appearance of the gods to the Great Flood is only 12 centuries. It's the lunar-solar calendar. It's the days, turnings of the stars. The ancients counted the stars every time they went around the eye of the dragon. The dragon was Alpha Draconis in the sky. It's the circumpolar sky. It's the circumpolar constellation in the north. The dragon is close to the pole star, so close that his eye was Alpha Draconis. It's the only star in the ancient vapor canopy world that did not move, because the other constellations moved around it. And every day, they counted the rotations of the tail of the dragon, and the tail of the dragon would tell them when a new day had started.
But you are Anuna. Everybody listening to my voice, we are the descendants of Anuna. This is the story of the ancient world. How these people who survived a cataclysm with their technology intact in the underworld, after a long period of time, then surfaced. When they surfaced, they built facilities. These facilities became known as paradises because everything was available, and those on the surface weren't allowed in the gates. Men lived a long time in comparison to what they've lived since, unquote. Now, I circled it for you. 1656 years is the vapor canopy duration, a phoenix number divisible by 138. The belief that Noah was 600 years old at the flood is actually a reference to the Anuna calendar of great years, the Ner period of 600-year epochs. Many civilizations were interrupted by something that they totally did not expect. We have in the archaeological record evidence, massive mining sites all over the world, construction sites. There was a building program going on in 1687 BC, such as this world has never seen before. We have found the evidence in the middle of the Pacific at the island of Yap, in the ancient basalt city of Metallinen. We have found the evidence in Michigan, Ohio, ancient mines, copper mines, strip mines, thousands of hammers, tools, and chisels left where they were, workbenches left where they were. No one was found because they ran away. Something interrupted a massive building project at Tiwanaku, at Lucramata, at Cuzco, all throughout the cities of Peru, at Tiryns in Greece, in Egypt. Many civilizations were interrupted by something that they totally did not expect. However, it was an event for which they were preparing for, and that's the subject of this video. Now, 1902, the events can be seen in many of my videos. I have 4 videos, maybe 5 videos with 1902 in the title or subtitle. But I discuss 1902 in probably as many as 40 videos. It is on the 138-year Phoenix phenomenon. Edits, resets, alterations in the holography of our world,